live here at the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal.
I'm Treacherous Trista.
Yes, and we're joined by the creator of Final Destination. He's here to talk about his new film, Don't Look Back, Jeffrey Reddick. It's very cool to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to try to think of a crazy name that starts with a J, but all I could think
J
of was
is always very hard.
I was like, Skelly? No, that doesn't sound really oh, Juicy, no.
Yeah, in the past, I've used Jittery, which isn't very frightening.
Yeah, but that...
And Jugular, but I don't want to use the same one again.
Yeah,
but Jugular was good.
Yeah, I'm a writer. I should have a bigger vocabulary with the J's, but yeah. Right. Jugular, I like Jugular. Jugular Jeffrey.
Yeah, it works. I like it. You could think about that the next movie. That could be a challenge for you. Try to think of a horror film named Jay.
Yeah, I will. Movie. That's definitely.
That's always the best way to start with your movie. I think I'll just start with a letter.
What's the killer? What's the killer? Yeah, Jugular Jay is not a bad name. I may have to use that. Give you all credit for it.
All right, very good. Very good. So Don't Look Back. It's coming out on demand and in theaters October 16th. So not very far from now, 10 days from now.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I'm really excited about it. It's my first film directing, first time directing a feature. So excited to get it out there to the world finally.
Was that something you always wanted to do, direct, when you started getting the films?
You know, I didn't when I started. I started off wanting to be an actor, then a writer, and then directing's been something I've been interested in doing. And I have a couple of projects that I've like, oh, I want to direct these someday. But then finally I'm like, well, someday is not, someday's going to be, someday unless I actually sit down and do it. So I decided I was going to, kind of make the jump and direct my first one. And I had a great time doing it. So I'm looking forward to doing some more down the road.
For people not familiar yet, what is Don't Look Back about?
It's a mystery. It's more of a mystery thriller. It's about a group of people who see somebody getting assaulted in a park and they don't intervene and help the person out. And the person dies. And, one of the witnesses videotapes it and it gets out to the world. And once the witnesses are out into the public, something or someone starts coming after them. So you're not sure if it's a supernatural threat or if it's a real killer coming after them. So yeah, it's definitely horror-ish, but it was, since I couldn't reveal like what was doing it or who's doing it, I couldn't kind of get into like really awesome like supernatural splatter scenes or slasher scenes. So that was the only thing. It's like you don't get to see a lot of the kills because I didn't want to cheat with the kills, so that when you came back later and watched the film again, you didn't feel like, oh, when you find out what's going on at the end, you don't feel like cheated if you watch it again. So it was a fine line to walk with this movie, but I'm really happy with how it turned out.
That whole setup I found interesting because I always think a problem in modern horror movies to find like a way around that people always have cell phones. And so like you just kind of went head on with it. It's kind of part of the horror of the movie is that people have cell phones today, but it's not necessary to use to help anybody. We're going to film this and put it up on social media.
Yeah, and that seems to be a problem that it wasn't as big of a problem when I wrote the script, but it seems to have gotten worse. Like hopefully we're at the peak of it now, but yeah, people's first instinct is, pull out your phone and start recording. It's like, well, at least pull out your phone and call 911 and then start recording. It's like take that step. But yeah, it does seem like people are so interested now in like getting something up online and trying to get virally famous that we've just lost that connection to wanting to help other people.
Yeah, which that's real life horror, which always, plays well and something I think a lot of people can relate to. Well, since you said it's more of a thing now than even when you wrote it, though, was there an incident or anything that kind of like inspired that idea?
There was a story that I heard when I was young that always stuck with me about this woman, Kitty Genovese, who the story at the time was that she was assaulted in the courtyard of her apartment. It was a horrible story. And the story was like 30 people witnessed it and didn't help. And so that story always stuck with me over the years. And then, I had a couple of situations where, I was like, should I get involved or not? So I realized that was kind of a human thing that we all go through. So I decided to use that as a setup for a horror film. And it's interesting because when were flying down to Baton Rouge to location scout, there was actually a documentary on the Kitty Genovese story. And you find out that actually some people did call the police and did help, but a reporter had gone down there to cover the story. And that was the kind of shocking angle that he went with. And that story became like the urban legend that we've all heard, that nobody helped. But yeah, that was a story that it's just always at the heart of, that just really stuck with me my whole life. That I just thought it was awful. How could nobody help? And you learn about the bystander effect. You learn about the psychology of why people don't help. So that was useful for this movie, but you also want to, it's a movie. So there's some people that don't help for very selfish reasons. And there's some people that, have a little bit more justification for why they don't get involved. But nobody calls the police. That's the thing. It's so I don't expect people, you don't expect people to run in and break up a fight or something where they put themselves in danger. But it's do something. There's something that you can do.
Yeah, especially when you actually physically have the tool to do that, and instead of using it to call, so you're actually using it to just record it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even I myself have joked, if I'm at somewhere and I was if something happens, at least record it so we can put it on YouTube. But it's more of a joke.
We've become conditioned to do that too. It's almost, I have my cell phone with me all the time, and it's funny, the character Nathan in the movie who records it is he's talking to the police. He's well, I recorded it for you guys, but you're did you really? Did you really record it for the police? Yeah. So yeah, it's a lot of interesting ideas that we're playing around with in this.
Did you write the script knowing you were going to direct it, or was it a script you wrote, before you knew you wanted to direct?
I wrote it before I knew I wanted to direct it, to be honest. I have a couple of passion projects that I wanted to do first, but we got interested in this script, and we had it set up at a studio that was going to make it, and then we cast the film. We got all of our locations, and we came back to LA, and they were we're shutting down our film department. And I was oh, great. And so my producer on it, Andrew Vandenhouten, he's the main producer on it. We decided, what, we've been through this, you go through this so many times with projects where they almost get made, something falls apart. And so I was talking to Andrew, and Andrew's let's just make it independently, screw the studio. And I'm all right. And that actually, there are limitations, obviously, when you're doing an indie film, with locations and things you have to work with, but you also get a lot of creative freedom, with casting and in the story, the story that you're telling. So you get a lot more creative freedom doing it independently. So I'm really happy that we went that route, because again, if we'd have waited around forever, it would probably still not be made for, now we're in COVID. So we shot it last March, right before, not right before, but before all of the COVID stuff happened. So I'm glad I did it, because it was also a challenging film to do for my first one, because the easy way to do this would have been to be just have it be all supernatural, and you could have really bloody, fun set pieces with people flying up in the air and getting ripped apart, or you could make it a slasher movie and same thing, people getting chased and, killed. But, I'm glad that I picked this one, because it was different and it was a little more challenging. So, I do want to sink my teeth into a straight up horror film the next time, because I want all the grue and the blood. But it was fun to do something a little bit more psychological, where I couldn't kind of just dip into that bag of tricks I have for horror.
Yeah. Is that what drew you to horror to begin with? Is the gore? Or I guess what drew you to horror?
I think what drew me to horror when I was young is it was kind of an escape, from life. And it was also, me and my friends would watch them, and everybody was oh, how can you all watch that stuff? It's so gross and disgusting. So it's kind of we thought we were cool because we could watch it, because it was kind of forbidden. Right. And then my mom didn't like me watching them, but then also she was well, he's hanging out with his friends at their house watching horror movies, so he's not out, getting in trouble or, doing drinking or doing drugs. So, well, we'll let him do that, even though we'll complain about it.
Do they watch your horror movies?
Yeah. My mom, she passed a few years ago, but
oh, I'm sorry.
She watched everything. And then my sister definitely, goes to see all my relatives. Yeah, they go to see them. They're very supportive. So yeah. It's cool.
Trista, you have a question?
So you said your first love was acting, and then obviously you found success as a writer, and now you just directed your first feature. Is it possible to ascertain which one of those you love the most or are most passionate about?
Um, it's tough because I loved acting. Like I studied from the time I was young. I studied theater. I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts for a summer program. But I started off in the early '90s when non-traditional casting was not a thing, and diversity in casting was not even on people's lips. So, um, literally, my agent was like, "Well, you're kind of like an ethnic Michael J. Fox, and I don't know what to do with that. So, if you played basketball or if you could rap." And basically, if I was, darker, she's like, I could find you work, but I just don't know what to put you up for. So the acting, has changed in the last decade, maybe a little. It's gotten better, but that was such a, hard thing to overcome. It's like, well, there are no roles for you. So I've definitely spent most of my life writing, which I do love. I still like, but I don't do it. I just do like little cameos here and there. But acting, I think I love probably because it's maybe my unfulfilled passion. Like I still love writing, and I really enjoy directing as well. Like I still like, the passion projects I want to do. I still have every intention of doing those as well. But um, that's a very political answer where I talk about all three things and don't give you a real answer. But I don't know. I think acting, I feel because maybe I haven't done it as much as I want to, like, I still feel like that is the thing I would still love to do. Um,
You ever tempted to write when you're writing to write a role specifically for you?
no, you know what? Not for the not for my projects because I just know how when you sell something, they want to cast names in all the roles. So I've never written a big role for myself. I've just always like taken a cameo here and there, but I love doing it. So I don't know. I may write a role for myself at some point. But it's funny because
Uh,
I write about killing teenagers, and even I guess if I dyed my hair and did the old Dawson's Creek thing, I could be like college. But I,
or you could be you could be a professor.
I could be a professor. Yeah.
Um, those like that conversation you said though, like if you play basketball, you rap. Is that something that you kept in mind though when you are writing scripts? Like I'm going to write roles that can be played by anybody, or
Yeah.
people like me in that same position today.
Yeah. Like, I mean, the funny thing is I've written roles like that in every one of my scripts, but they still always cast them with white actors and actresses. And I think that that's the part of the conversation that kind of gets lost on the current generation when we are talking about representation in film. Um, is it's just the default in people's mind when they read a script or read a book, like they always envision a white person. So when we send out a casting notice saying, open to all ethnicities, 99% of the submissions we get are white actors and actresses. So we have to send out a specific casting notice saying we're looking for black actors or Latino actors or Asian actors, or it's you, and still you still get them sending you some white people. So that's why I had such a great time with casting Good Samaritan, because I've been in casting sessions for films where we have been specifically looking for actors and actresses of color, and I've seen so many wonderfully talented people. So I know when studios say, "Oh, well, the reason we cast," especially when it's a role that was, a comic book role that had it was an Asian character or a Latino character or African American, where they cast a white actor or actress, and they say, "Oh, we just cast the best person." That's just bullshit. They cast the person that they thought would be the most accessible to audiences, because they're just not looking like. And so with this film, um, I found an African American actress who was amazing and perfect for the lead character, and I'm so glad that I did it independently because I probably wouldn't have had a chance to cast her if I'd had done it at the studio.
So would you say that that's really not gotten better on like the more mainstream level then?
Um, I think it's maybe gotten better like within the last year and a half when people have started being aggressive about it. I think it has gotten better, but it's been very recent. It's been very recent, and again, and the issue is, it's I don't. I don't like to use the term racism about everything, because I think some things are racist, like actively bad racist. But I think, again, it's just a lot of it is what people's default is when they automatically think of a character, and when they say a leading role, they automatically just send all their white talent for the leading men and women.
It might not be a malicious intent there.
It's not malicious. It's just, but then when they say, oh, well, that we found the best person, it's like, well, there's a whole pool of people that you didn't even consider for the lead role. So they're just, it's kind of like they used to just be automatically excluded from lead roles, and now people are starting to include them in lead roles. So that it's changed, the perception has changed, and the dynamic has definitely changed recently.
When you said you studied to be an actor, how about directing? Is that something, did you do that in school at all, or is it something working on other movies that you kind of learned?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to pretty much be on the set of all my films. So I just went on set and I watched directors, and I learned. I mean, it's funny, until you actually direct, you still don't know the things that you don't know until you get on set. But it's almost like the writing, like, because I was so focused on acting growing up that when that happened with my agent, I was like, well, I'm not going to quit the business. I'm going to stay in this business. I'm good at writing, so let me focus on that. And then I started doing more producing, and now I'm at a point where it's like I have stories that I want to tell, and instead of waiting for other people to like finance this stuff and get it together, if I can do it myself, I'll try to do it myself. Again, it would be great to do a movie at a studio level, Final Destination the first one had a $20 million budget. I mean, that would be sweet. But if the business has changed so much that it's, to get those kind of budgets for projects, it's like they want you to already have like a couple of A-list actors on, that have bankability around the world. It's not just that they're well known, they have to be bankable. There's a lot of business stuff that you have to deal with. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like this new age where people are starting to direct things and put them on like digital platforms and YouTube, and there's a lot more opportunity for filmmakers, which is great, to get your work out there and get it seen. So this is probably one of the best times for other people that are aspiring writers or directors or actors, any kind of artist, is now you have the internet and you have these platforms where you can get your work out there and be seen. So you don't have to rely on trying to get to Hollywood and get to a studio to make your stuff. So it's it's a much better place and time to be a filmmaker.
Along those lines, because that comes up a lot. There's more platforms now. Something I thought about recently was not only the more platforms, so like you said, the more people get their stuff out there. I think it's you could get some stuff out there that not normally wouldn't have been seen, like more niche stuff that like people would have been like, even like kind of mainstream stuff. I don't think years ago like people would have made a show about a teacher who's selling meth or anything. That probably wouldn't have happened when there's like 3 network channels. But
there's a lot more, and the thing is, there's so many people in the country. Like there's like 300 million people in the United States alone. So if there's an audience out there for everything. It's just you've got to figure out a way to get to them. And a lot of people not everybody's on the internet, not everybody's on Twitter or Facebook, but also on the internet, it's a global market now. So there's an audience for what you as an artist have to put out. It's just trying to reach them and figure out how to get a hold of them. But you have the ability now to reach a global audience when you didn't have that before. It was like you had the major networks, the 3 networks, the major studios, and that was it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a very interesting time to be an artistic person, because again, it's really just about getting your work in front of eyeballs or in front of ears, and trying to figure out how to get that done.
When you said about being on set on most of the movies you wrote, was that something like you wanted to do, or was it just something that happened that way?
No, I wanted to go. And the good thing is I worked at New Line Cinema for 11 years, and that was a studio that produced Final Destination and has produced all of them and put them out. So I knew that the reason a lot of times directors didn't want writers on set were because, once a director comes on a project, you're basically handed over to them. It's their project. It's not your project anymore. So I know a lot of directors had bad experiences where, writers just show up on the set and they're like, that's not how I wrote this scene. And they start talking to the actors, and it's it's a pain in the ass for the director. So I was very mindful beforehand of being like, look, I know the deal. Like, I'm just going there to observe and have fun and watch. I'm not going to go there and say anything, or I know this is your film. And so I just kind of laid that out. And so the directors had been really great about letting me come to set and having me come to set. So
yeah, I was on my first feature set in December. That's actually I met Trista, and just being there, like, I know it sounds silly, but like I had a certain perception of what a director does, and it was a lot different than what the director actually does.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, it
that's
doesn't
what
sound silly
directing
at
is.
all. Like, it's, you know, being on set, it demystifies a lot of the ideas that you have in your head. You know, like, yeah, you grow up hearing about directors that are, you know, like running around on set with bullhorns and screaming at everybody and yelling,
Right.
sitting in their chairs with their three-piece suits. And it's like, some of them are like that, but I haven't seen any bullhorns. But it is a lot. Every set is completely different. Like, the director set definitely sets the tone. And I've been fortunate that all the directors that I've worked with, they've all been like really mellow, down to earth, seasoned kind of professionals, or even if they were new, they were very just down to earth. Like, haven't had a screamer and yeller in the bunch.
Well, that's good. Tristan, do you have a question?
You mentioned working for New Line, and I'm wondering if you can talk more about how you got that job and your experience and your relationship with Robert Shaye.
Oh yeah. It's so funny how I ended up at New Line. It started when I was 14. I saw A Nightmare on Elm Street, and I grew up in this small town in Eastern Kentucky, and I saw the movie and it blew my mind. That's the movie that made me fall in love with horror movies. Like, I liked them before that, but this Nightmare on Elm Street made me fall in love with movies. So I went home and I banged out an origin story for Freddy Krueger, you know, which is a 14-year-old origin story. I mean, I was 14, so it wasn't that great. But I sent it to Bob Shaye. I got his address and mailed it to Bob Shaye in New York. And he wrote me back and said, I'm sorry, we don't take unsolicited material. So I had to look up what that meant because I was only 14. and then I sent it back to him and I said, look, sir, I've spent $3 on your movies. So I think you can take $5, or you can take 5 cents for my story. And he did. He read it and he got back to me. And he was very encouraging. And Bob Shaye and his assistant Joy Mann, who's unfortunately no longer with us, they kind of took me under their wing, and they would send me scripts and movie posters and movie tchotchkes, and they, you know, just really encouraged me to keep writing. So from age 14 to 19, when I was in Kentucky, I was always in contact with them. So when I was 19, I went to New York to study at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts for the summer. And Joy and Bob were like, do you want to intern here for the summer? I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. And then after, you know, I got an agent who later told me that I reminded her, and I think Michael J. Fox, and couldn't get me any work. But, you know, I got an agent. I was working at New Line. So I'm like, I'm going to stay here and not go back to school. So I ended up staying at New Line, and then got hired on and then worked there for 11 years. So it was probably, I mean, especially when I started there, like, New Line was just the best studio to work for. You know, everybody there was, all the executives were film lovers there. You know, you had Bob Shaye, Sarah Risher, you know, Mike DeLuca, like, and they were making movies that studios wouldn't make. Like, you know, they made Blade, and studios were like, who wants to see a black vampire slayer? You know, Dumb and Dumber, or The Mask. Who wants to see a movie about a guy with a mask? You know, like, so they would make these movies that no other studio would make, just off creative instinct that there was an audience out there for them. So there was a lot of like creative freedom there, and, you know, and I was in the New York office, so that was the corporate office. So I can imagine how awesome LA would have been, the LA office, but I love the New York office. And I learned a lot just as a filmmaker, because I saw how they made movies behind the scenes. So I would see a great script come in from an unknown writer that didn't have any elements attached to it. And then I would see a really awful script come in with an A-list star attached, and they would make the awful, you know, that's later, you know, as it started getting more corporate, I would see those decisions and I was like, oh, this isn't about the value of the writer or the script. So I learned to separate my ego very early on in the business, which I think is probably what's kept me, you know, not going crazy or not quitting the business at any point, you know, is I've learned, I mean, it's still, obviously, if somebody rejects your work, it doesn't feel good, but I'm not devastated like a lot of my, you know, colleagues or newer people starting out in the business I know can often, if their one script gets rejected, they're devastated and they think I should never do this again. And you have to realize it's not, you should always be open to creative criticism because that's the only way you're ever going to grow. And I meet a lot of people who think that they're the best at what they do. And I think once you're at that point, you're done growing. And you're probably not the best if you think that. And because I found like some coverage from New Line, like for my first script I'd sent them, and the executive, I was still in Kentucky, and the executive wrote back, said, it got really good coverage, but it's not right for us. And when I finally started working there, I found that old coverage and it was awful. It was like, this kid, you know, it's adorable, this young kid's writing a script, but he'll never be a writer. And I'm like, I'm glad, you know, if I'd have read that when I was young, I would have probably been like, oh, I guess I can't do this. So, you know, you've got to learn to kind of take constructive criticism, but you also, no matter what kind of artist you are, but especially a writer as well, like you get better over time. Like your first several scripts are probably not going to be the greatest scripts in the world because you don't have the practice and you just don't have the practice that you have after you've written 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 scripts. So I think the best thing I learned there was just to separate not taking things personally and learning how the business operates. So that helped me a lot moving forward when I deal with other, you know, studios or when I deal with creative people. I think I know how to deal with creative people better. But it was a wonderful, I mean, plus they made Nightmare on Elm Street and they made my movie. So they're the best studio ever, in my opinion.
What was it about Nightmare on Elm Street, do you think, that really stuck with you?
You know what? I think there was just so much going on in that movie. It was smart. I'd never seen a villain like Freddy before. The way that Wes Craven like blurred the line between like you weren't sure if you were in a dream or you were in reality. Like I'd never seen that done like that before. I think Heather Langenkamp, you know, playing Nancy. I think Nancy was the toughest, smartest final girl I'd ever seen in a movie up until that point. She's probably one of the smartest in the genre, if you think about it, because, you know, as much as I love a lot of the other iconic scream queens and other horror franchises, you know, in the first several movies, they spent most of their time, you know, running. They would stab the killer, run again and cry and stab the killer. And, you know, Nancy like researched.
She tries to, outthink him. And
she researched him, booby trapped the house. She went in the nightmare after him. So there were just in the soundtrack, everything about it. Like I feel like with that movie, because all the studios had turned it down except for New Line. And so I think this was not that he didn't pour his heart and soul into everything he did, but I just feel like this was his, dream project, and he put everything he had into it. And so if you look at all the special effects they did with such a small budget, I just thought it was brilliant. Like it blew my mind when I was a kid. Like I was like, and I still watch it. I still love it.
Yeah. What do you think of the sequels?
It's funny because I'm in the minority in that, as much as I think the sequels are good in there once you get some distance from them. Like my issue with part 2 was that they made it almost like a comedy. Like they went really heavy into the comedy with the second one, and they broke all the nightmare rules.
That's my problem is the rules. I think any kind of horror movie or any movie really, but you should stick to the rules, so that whatever you establish.
Yeah, so that was kind of annoying. And then also I got annoyed too because, you know, all the kind of homophobic stuff started coming out after the second one. And I remember David Chaskin pretty much threw Mark Patton under the bus and blamed it all on him and was like, I didn't write anything gay in the movie. I'm like, are you kidding? You got the coach at a leather bar getting naked and wet. Like there are so many gay things in that movie. And now he admits that he did that on purpose. But at the time, you know, growing up, like as a gay man, or as a gay kid, I saw him throw kind of Mark Patton under the bus. I think and it just, that frustrated me about the second one. I love the third one, but I'm also a big comic geek. So I felt like the third one, I know Wes had a much bigger vision for it and a bigger budget, but they wouldn't give it to him. So I felt that as much as I love it, I hate that they kill Nancy. I'll never forgive them for that. And the fourth one, I think I love the fourth one, except for the fact that they kill all the Dream Warriors at the beginning. But I think stylistically, I think Rennie Harlan I think that was one of the best directed ones of the franchise. I thought it was so beautifully shot. And I love Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
That's personally I think it's the best of the sequels.
Yeah,
I think it's the
yeah.
most underrated of the movies.
I do too. I do too. I love Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and Freddy Jason was fine. I had my own pitch that I pitched when I worked at New Line, so I didn't get it. So I enjoy it. It's kind of goofy fun. And the remake is just like, why?
It's not as good as the first as the original one. I think is
No. I mean, they tried what they tried in the remake is the thing that bugged me was they would have homages to the original scenes in the first movie, but then they would just CGI them and do them bad. Like
one of the best scenes in the first one is when he's coming through the wall.
Yeah.
And it's done, I guess, from what I understand, pretty cheaply, but it looks way better than the CG version.
Oh yeah, it does. It does. And also this is the most I'll ever come to talking shit about somebody, but I just don't, because I read an interview where Kate Mara was complaining that she got that role, where she's like, yeah, I walked out of the audition and it was upset because I knew I got it. And I was like, first of all, that's very, you should be grateful that you get work in this town.
Yeah.
There are a million people that would kill for that job. Second of all, it shows in your performance because you're awful as Nancy. You're definitely just wandering around the movie like, when's my contract up? So I thought her performance like really kind of ruined it with some of the other issues that I had with it. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that franchise now, because it's a great franchise, and I mean, Robert Englund's not going to want to play Freddy forever, and he can't play Freddy forever unless you CGI him 100 years from now and do that body motion cap stuff. But it's a cool world still, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah, but I'm glad you like A New Nightmare, because I know not everyone does, but I love just the question it asks, like why are we into the killer in these movies?
Yeah,
so, it's an interesting and kind of makes us as horror fans, question ourselves.
Yeah. No, I love that one.
So Jeremy Holmes in Don't Look Back, who I've had on the show, and I'm a big fan of his. I think he's awesome in The Ranger.
Oh, he's such a diva. He was like the worst. He threw stuff at me. He fought all the time. He was so hard to work with. I forgot when I said I hadn't worked with him. Jeremy is so mean. I'm totally kidding, of course. He's like the nicest guy. We were very fortunate to have him in the movie. He was just amazing.
I know it's kind of early yet, but what has been like the feedback so far for Don't Look Back?
You know what? It's been good. I'm not just I don't know if people are just being nice to my face. The one thing that I'm hearing, which I kind of expected, is some of the horror reviewers are like, it's not horror now. I think they were going in expecting like a Final Destination kind of horror film with this, and it's not that at all. So I think that's been the one critique I've heard from some people that I was expecting. But so far the feedback has been really good. I think the reviews start going up on the 9th. So all the people that I've done interviews with, I mean, again, they might just be saying that because they don't want to tell me on an interview that they enjoy, but I think they enjoy it because it's got horror in it, because anything I do is going to have horror in it, but it really is also kind of a mystery and a statement on kind of guilt and, karma and how we don't help each other. So there's more. That's
what I personally like in horror genres, some type of social commentary or, more than just, killing people, which that's fun too. But
that's fun too. I know it's always funny because when I talk about it, I'm very mindful because I hate when I used to read in Fangoria where there was a horror movie coming out and they're like, well, it's not really a horror movie. It's it's a horror movie. And
I'd always kind of annoy the people who really want to fight about what genre a movie is. I always think like, at the end of the day, does it really matter? Did you like it less if you consider it sci-fi or thriller than if you consider it horror? I don't really understand why people get so bent up on it. But I like that about horror too, because not all horror is the same.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that there's like, because I consider a lot of thrillers to be horror films. There's sci-fi movies. Like Alien in my mind is a horror film. Yeah. So that's what I love about it, is I feel like it's a wide umbrella. And so people, when they say they don't like horror films, I'm like, well, what specifically do you want? I either usually hear like people that don't like bloody slasher movies because I don't like blood and people getting cut up. And I've met a lot of people who are like, I don't like possession movies because I ain't messing with Satan. So those have been the two definite ones. I don't want like movies where there are demons, and I don't like movies where there's like people being tortured and like maimed violently on screen.
So if you put out a demonic possession movie with a lot of torture, you're going to turn off a lot of people.
I'm going to turn off a lot of people. Maybe I should do that though.
It's for me. I'm good with it.
Both of them. Okay. So, yeah. As long as you're interested to watch it, I'll be fine.
Yeah. Trista, you have a question?
As you mentioned, I think one of the major themes in Don't Look Back is karma. And I'm wondering if that's a concept that you subscribe to or you feel is relevant in your own life.
You know what? I do. And people have asked me that. And it's weird because it's not like I follow like the Buddhist belief that karma is an absolute thing, but it's just I've had too many things happen in my life that couldn't be coincidence, you know. And one example I use, which is just an obvious one, is I was in New York one time and was walking to lunch from New Line. I was walking to lunch, and a friend of mine from college popped into my head, and I walked around the corner and he was there visiting. And New York has millions of people, and it's, you know, so I've had a lot of stuff like that happen to me where I just know that, okay, this is, you know, it's just not a coincidence. I mean, why was I thinking about this person right before I bumped into them? You know, and so I think that, you know, I think if you, I like how Oprah said it one time. Oprah's very smart. I love Oprah. But she kind of said, like, if you're kind of on the right path in life, like, you'll get little God nods from the universe, you know, like little things that are kind of letting you know, like, and they're little signs that you see. And sometimes they're just things that you see personally. And I do believe that, because I have found that when I'm kind of going with the flow of my life, when I'm not trying to over control everything, things will fall into place. They may not fall into place like I plan them to, but they fall into place. Whereas if I try to really force something that isn't going to happen, it feels like I just muck it up and it doesn't happen even more. So, and I do think if you put good energy out there in the world and you do good things, that it does come back to you. You know, it's almost like the people you attract, you know. It's like, I certainly went through a stage in my life, you know, before I quit drinking, where, you know, I was like, I would just be out at a bar and I'm like, why am I attracting all the like psychotic, like weird people? And it's like, because I think I was putting that energy out there, you know. Like I could go to like a crowded bar with 100 people, and like the one person that would walk right up to me would be like the really bad, like alcoholic drug addict who was like, you know, we're going to get married in 5 minutes. I'm going to kill you. So, you know, I think it is a lot about just what we put out in the world does kind of come back to us and also brings that to us.
So we talked a lot about like kind of the modern stuff in the movie, but then you also have the crow in the movie, which I think is, you know, kind of like a contrast with modern stuff in like classic, you know, horror. I don't know if that was like a reason to include the crow.
Well, you know, it's funny because I think when you're writing and creating stuff, you always take your influences come with you. So, you know, I love The Birds. I love The Omen, especially The Omen 2, you know, which had a very significant, you know, crow action in that movie. But also I think, you know, for me, I also wanted there to be a symbol. Like if you watch the movie and you rewatch it, you realize the crow always shows up when death is present. And when I say death, I don't mean like Final Destination death. I mean like, you know, whether it's a supernatural or a killer that is doing the evil, somebody's about to die. So when you go back and watch it, it's that thread that, you know, that sign of death is always there. So that's one of the things Caitlin picks up on that starts, you know, getting her on this road that she's looking around for other clues that will kind of lead her to who the killer is.
Is it hard to work with a crow?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give him a bad rap or anything, but
you know, I heard his rap. Yeah.
We had really good animal wranglers because we had mice and crows, and then we also, one of the nights we had the crow, we had rain machines, so it was stunts, crows, and rain in one night. But you know what? They're really good at flying and landing, so you can get them to fly and land really good. But they're not good at sitting around. So there's a scene where Caitlin and another character are looking out his window, and there's a crow that's his crashed in the window, was laying there on the ground, and it's supposed to be flopping around and then fly off. And we couldn't get it to flop. So then we just decided, okay, well, we'll just get it to stay there on the ground. But it kept landing in frame and then not angling itself so that we could get a good shot of it. So I realized when I was watching the dailies back that I had the Courtney and Damon, who played Kurt, like I had them standing for 45 minutes. I didn't realize it was that long because I was so focused on the crow and we were moving over and we kept rolling. But they stood in that window for 45 minutes looking down like they were like nervous, which is hard, you know, to stand in one position. And I went to them the next day. I'm like, I am so sorry. I had no idea you guys, and they didn't complain at all. Like nobody in the cast ever complained. They were wonderful. So they didn't say anything. I was like, we finally got the shot with the crow, but it was like going through like almost an hour of footage from different camera angles. Like, so, but they fly good. The mice were actually much better. The mice were much better than the crows, I will say.
It's good advice for people out there who want to put an animal in their movie. Go with the mouse.
Go with mice.
Mark Heller on Facebook wants to know why did you ruin log trucks and roller coasters for all of us?
Oh, Mark, I know that SOB. I miss you, buddy. You know what? I came up with a log truck idea in Final Destination 2 because we couldn't. We were originally going to be a hotel fire, and the producer Craig Perry was like, that's just not, it's not exciting enough. Like we need something else. So I was going home to visit my mom in Kentucky, and I got behind a log truck, and I always move over when that happens. So I pulled over and I pulled off the road and I called Craig and I was like, "What about a log truck?" And he's like, "What? Slow down." I'm like, "What about a log truck on a freeway?" And he's like, "That's it." So I have to give so much praise to David Ellis, who directed that film, because he was a stunt person, so he's unfortunately no longer with us either, but he came from a stunt background. So for that scene, we didn't write out every beat of it, because we knew that he knew that world. So we're just like, here's what happens, go for it. And I think he directed one of my favorite set pieces of any horror franchise, actually.
Yeah. I think iconic is used, overused, but anytime I think anyone who's even remotely horror fan sees a log truck, they think of that scene.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I get so many log truck or truck memes when people are driving behind trucks where they've got all their junk stacked up in the back and there's one sharp thing sticking out. You're like, hopefully I don't die. I'm like, well, get in the other lane, fool.
Yeah, don't take a picture of it. Yeah. It connects to both your movies. Yeah. Trista, do you have another question?
I was wondering, it sounds like Robert Shaye was a mentor to you, and I was wondering if you've ever considered being a mentor to someone else.
Yeah, I actually do that a lot. I will say I've done that a lot throughout my career, where I try to help other people out, if I can. I mean, the hardest thing to do, is I still work for myself. I mean, I have a great agent manager, but I don't have a production company or things like that. So I'll have a lot of people that'll be like, "Hey, can you read my script?" And there are legal reasons why you can't read scripts. One funny story I'll tell you, because everybody's always worried that people are going to steal their scripts in Hollywood, but there's a friend of mine who's a screenwriter, and we were at a party like maybe 5 years ago, and they were a little drunk, and his wife was like, "Tell Jeff the story, the Final Destination story," and he's like, "No, I don't," and I've known them forever. And so finally he told me, like, he had written basically like a comedy version of Final Destination. Like a guy had a premonition, cheated death, and then death was in his script was a complete fuck up. I don't mean to curse a lot, but
no,
sometimes
it's fine.
Okay, so death was a complete fuck up. So death was like this idiot thing running around trying to kill these people that cheated it. And he submitted it to New Line, and they're like, "We literally bought the horror version of this like a month ago." So I was thinking, if he turned that in like 3 months later, or 3 months earlier, he would have thought that I stole his story, because there's so many similar ideas out there. So it's hard for me to read scripts because I've only got so much time on my hands, but I definitely try to help people and connect people. And I've had writers that I've mentored over the years. My goal is at some point to have a production company where I can also have people working with me to like help facilitate a lot more of that. But there have been plenty of times where I've seen films at film festivals and I've sent them around to people that I know. You know, I do judging for festivals as well, like for
nice.
films and reading screenplays. So I definitely am a big proponent in helping other people because, you know, if Bob Shaye hadn't have, I mean, I know that I would have still been in the industry. Like I was just too determined not to, but I don't know, my career path would have probably been a lot different and a lot more hard if Bob hadn't reached out to me.
Yeah. That's one of the main things I miss currently, though, are the going to film festivals. So I'm glad that you're into them as well.
Yeah, I miss the conventions and the festivals because those things just, you know, especially when you're a writer, you spend so much time like isolated working. And I'm just like, you know, when you go to festivals and cons and you get to meet the fans, and it's just like so like refreshing and soul filling, you know, to go. So it's like definitely something I'm missing, especially around this time of year, which when the horror cons are really happening. Like I'm really missing that. I'm doing still the virtual stuff, and I've done some judging for, you know, virtual festivals, but yeah, I miss the people. I miss the people.
I agree. And so I rewatched Final Destination for the show, and I was just wondering, was Rocky Mountain High like in your mind when you were writing the script? Because
No,
it's used for a pretty good scene in the movie.
Yeah, that was because James Wong and Glenn Morgan came on board the project, and they did a pretty big overhaul of the project, and so a lot of the stuff that they did, like the music stuff, that was their selection. And I think the biggest thing that they did, and I have to give them so much credit for this, is, you know, in my original version, since death didn't kill them the first time, it basically exploited some fear of theirs and made the characters commit suicide. So it was a little darker, little tiny bit darker.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, in my script, like Alex's best friend Todd, he still got hung, but in my script, he rigged up a noose at his family garage, and he called his father, who was a pastor, and he'd done some stole money from his dad and stuff like that. So he's calling his dad, apologizing, and the dad's like freaking out because he can tell something's wrong, and he's driving home. And when the dad opens the garage, he doesn't realize that Todd's set a noose up in there, so that when the dad opens the garage, it hangs him. So the death scenes, a lot of them are parallel to what I did, but they came up with the whole Rube Goldberg idea, you know, that death kind of uses things around you to get you. And I think that actually made the film more universal. Like, even like in my version, you never saw death, but mine was definitely a little bit more of a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of take on how death got the victims. So I think the Rube Goldberg angle was like a very genius idea that they came up with that just made the film more universal.
With, you know, all the world of so many reboots and remakes and even doing sequels to older movies, is there talks to do another one at any point in time?
Oh yeah, they've been talking about it for a while. It's so funny because, and I say this just as a matter of business, like it's kind of funny because if this were any other franchise, like there would have been 15 of them by now, you know, because they do well and people like them. But for some reason, it's like New Line's been a little hesitant about making sequels, you know, as often as they do, and they are a little bit pricey. I mean, the first one was $20 million. And now you have, you know, horror movies that get made for like 5 to 7 million that are huge hits. So they're a little bit more costly, but they were actively preparing to do a new one before COVID hit. Like they were going to try to, because it's the 20th anniversary. I wrote the first one when I was 5, so it's the 20th anniversary. So they wanted to have one to come out on the 20th anniversary or be ready, you know, in production and ready to come out about this time. But COVID hit, and so that kind of put everything on the back burner. But there will definitely be a 6th one.
You know, though, we say about writing it 20 years ago, if you were to write like the sequel, you know, 20 years, people do change a lot. So I would assume it would have a different tone or a different movie. You know, 20 years later, you look at death differently than you did when you were younger.
I never thought about it. You've asked me the one question and brought up the one thing that nobody's ever brought up to me. Now I have to think for a minute. It would be interesting. It would be interesting to see how I would write it now. It's funny because in the sequels, you know, because there is a formula to the movies that they don't want to break. So that's the one angle that the sequels haven't really delved into, is like how do, you know, people in 2020 view death as opposed to how they used to view it. Probably with a lot of iPhones, recording horrible stuff all the time. Yeah. It's funny because I'm not afraid of, I've always said this, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to, my mom lived to be 97. So that's my thing is I'm going to live to be 97. I've got it in my head. So I just don't want to die too young, and I don't want to die slowly. Like, and by slowly, I mean, I don't want to be like fall into a cavern out in the desert and be stuck there for like weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's a really unusual take. Most people, are looking forward to
that. But I'm not like I think I've always had a very young at heart kind of personality, and I think that's what kind of keeps people alive a lot longer. Like I don't stress a lot, and I think stress can hurt, kill you the most. And so I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want it to happen anytime within the next 40 to 50 years.
Yeah. That is interesting though, because that would be hard to do in a movie, the fear of like a slow, painful death. Within like the Final Destination, because most of the Final Destination stuff is a quick death.
Yeah. That would just be probably one person. Like
right. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It'd be like the 127 hours. It'd be like that, where you're just stuck in the desert slowly.
Right. Well, maybe the series.
Yeah, or that could just be somebody could just call it Final. They could just do a riff on Final Destination where it's like the person is slowly dying.
Yeah.
You just keep going back to that character while all the other stuff is happening quick. You just go back to that one character. He's like, yeah, still sitting here dying.
Right. Yeah. Reminds me of a scene in another movie. I can't think of the movie. Austin Powers, when the cars slowly coming to run him over, and they keep coming back. He's like, ah.
I love that. That's another New Line movie. I mean, it's again, who would have thought that would have been like the phenomenon it is? I hope they do another one. I love that franchise so much. It's so funny.
Mm-hmm. Trista, you have another question?
Well, so you were in Kentucky and you had this magical relationship with New Line, and then you went to New York and pursued acting and went to a conservatory. But I'm wondering if there was any sort of art scene in Kentucky at all.
Where I grew up in high school, we didn't really, because it was a very small town. It used to be a coal mining town. So we didn't have an arts program, but I will say my English teacher, I talked her into creating like for a semester, we had like a little theater program, and we all got involved in it, and we put on a play, and it was awesome. And it was funny because I told that teacher, her name was Maria Bellamy. She's still a really dear friend of mine, but I told her, I said, if I ever get a movie made, I'm going to bring you out to the premiere and, take you to Broadway. And so when the movie came out, I actually brought her out to the premiere, and we ended up on the Rosie O'Donnell show. It was really, it was really
That's awesome.
Yes. Go see The Lion King. So I'm a very big proponent of education and teachers, because they're so underpaid and undervalued. And apparently now they're like bad people. If you listen to the COVID kind of stuff, it's like, wow, those teachers unions are awful. But no, I've been a big proponent of education. So we didn't have a big art scene, but I think you find that in schools across America, like when they start cutting extracurricular stuff, it's the art stuff that gets cut first, because I don't think most people consider it real work. And, I certainly heard growing up, like, don't major in acting, like get something where you can get a real job. It's just like a lot of people just don't consider working in the arts is real art. So I think that's really underfunded in our schools. And I think it's so enriching for people to be able to explore that. I did go to a college, Berea College in Kentucky, which is a phenomenal college. And they had a really good theater program. And it focused on acting. Like I remember I had a choice between two colleges, and I went to like the really big university, like EKU in Kentucky. And they had this really beautiful performance, but with a lot of like glitz and things flying from the ceiling and glitter everywhere. It was just like, wow, this is a big production. And then I went to Berea, and they had Of Mice and Men, which is a very intimate, small play. And the acting was just like riveting. And I'm like, I got to go to this college. And so they had a really wonderful art program there. And Kentucky's actually, it's funny because Kentucky's like, and I think Berea is the craft capital of the world. So they're very, very big into the craft side of art, like building, crafts and making crafts. But not so much the acting and the painting and the music. But again, I think that's a issue that you find in a lot of towns across America where the arts aren't really encouraged in school or taught enough in school. And I think it's a shame, but you can find communities. That's another great thing about the internet these days, is like you can find an artistic community, you know, even online, to like help you and, you know, promote, you know, not promote you. Sorry, my brain is like not working as, no, this is actually how my brain usually works. Motivate you. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. To motivate you and inspire you. So.
How has the internet, because you would have been starting like kind of the early days of the internet. So, you know, and it's really risen obviously in the last 20 years you've been doing this.
Yeah.
How has that affected or changed anything you've worked on?
It doesn't necessarily, I guess the only thing that I've noticed from a purely work point of view is people always want to know how many Twitter followers people have. Well, it's like, we should cast this person. They have a lot of Instagram followers, and there's been no correlation between Instagram followers and box office. So that's been something that, you know, was bothersome for a while, but I think that's starting to die out a little bit. That's really the only side of it from a creative point of view that I saw there be an impact for a long time. It was like, well, let's find out who's got the biggest social media following and then put them in our movies. You know, again, I think on the positive, it gives people an opportunity to get their work out there and get it seen in a bigger way. So that's been very positive. But yeah, I think that's kind of it. I think, you know, it gives people more accessibility, which is great. It's just how people use it. You know, like when the internet first started, I was like, this is going to be the most amazing thing in the world, because now we can see that, you know, we can see people in other states and other countries, and we'll realize that we're all human beings and we'll all like really get along. It's going to be awesome. Cut to 20 years later, I'm like, wow, we fucked that up.
Yeah,
that did not go how I thought it would.
No. And when you talk about constructive criticism, there's a lot of criticism online, but I don't know about the constructive part.
No, it's, I take it with a grain of salt anymore, because I realize like people that are, and again, this is about non-constructive negative criticism.
Yeah.
People that are angry, or people that are angry are, you know, you'll see like somebody that's got like 5 followers, but they tweet like 50 times a day. It's because they're sitting around angry all the time. So people that are angry are more likely to post something than somebody who watches something or reads something of yours or sees a piece of art that you've done. You know, they're most likely to say, oh, this is cool, and then they'll show it to their friends, but they're less likely to post a review, you know, as opposed to a person that's going to be like, this is the worst piece of garbage ever, and this person should jump off a bridge. And we should shoot their whole family. It's like, what?
Maybe a movie wasn't for you, but I don't know about that. Let's see in the chat here. Stellar Steven wants to know, did you do research for other deaths in any of the other movies like you did for the log scene?
I didn't so much do research as I tried to think of scenarios that people found themselves in. You know, that's kind of, I think, how you kind of, when you're looking at a Final Destination death, it's like, well, what's a scenario like for the hospital scene? You know, obviously somebody's going to end up in a hospital there. And so, you know, when I wrote the story for the second one, like, you know, I had that scene in there where you kind of it was a misdirect on who was going to get killed. And I had the plate of glass, like, kill a character, but in my version, it like hit them like this way, and like, then they peeled forward and backwards, which I think the splatter that they do with the kid is better. I'm not proposing that you splatter kids. I'm just saying that.
We're going to cut that one part.
Yeah. Jeff said to go kill kids. What? But you know, when I look at scenes, but especially when I was working on the second Final Destination, it was trying to find like locations that people are at a lot of times, and then figuring out something that could happen at that location. Because you want it to be like, oh, I don't want to go to the dentist anymore now, or I don't want, you know, you always want to hit something.
Yeah. Robert says the airplane flight in Final Destination was the exact same flight number I was on when I watched the movie for the first time.
Oh,
pretty awesome.
There was a flight 180 from New York to Los Angeles, and I don't know if subconsciously, because, you know, there was a lot of travel, New Line travel from. I don't know if that stuck in my head subconsciously or what when I first named it Flight 180, but yeah, I'm sorry. But you're alive, so that means that you're gonna have a long, healthy life.
Very good. Yes.
Yes.
Most people are saying that they love your movies, by the way. And AJ says Tony Todd is badass. How, he is badass, and that for a horror fan, that'd be pretty cool to have Tony Todd in your first.
I have to say, like when they got him, I was like, "Holy crap, Candyman!" Like Candyman's gonna be my. Yeah, like he's amazing. I had the pleasure of working with him on the Final Wish as well, and he is such a warm, like kind person. He studied theater. Like I went to see a one-man show he did, 90 minutes, just him on stage. This was just like a year and a half ago. And he just owned the theater. Like he's just got such a presence, and he so many layers to him. He's such a wonderful actor. And a lot of times, if you watch like the remake of Night of the Living Dead, you get to see different aspects of him. But, a lot of times people just bring him in because he's just got that voice and that presence that it's like, he can do that really well, but he's got so many like layers to him. He's an amazing person. He's just like so down to earth. Can't say nothing about Tony.
I won't plug other movies, but honestly, his new movie Immortal, he's great in it.
Oh, I haven't seen that. All right, now I got it. I got to watch that. All right.
Yeah. And while I'm on the movies, did you see Scream Queen? Since you mentioned, Mark Patton, his documentary.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm glad he. It's funny because it's hard for people if you're not in the situation to understand, like, because again, he had a really great career trajectory going, and then when Nightmare 2 came out, it's literally like they just completely threw him under the bus and blamed him for like the movie not doing as well. And perception is everything in Hollywood, so the work's going to dry up. Plus, he was dealing with a lot of personal tragedy in his life, so. I'm really glad that he's kind of got the catharsism. I had the chance to meet him. He's a lovely person. And I'm glad he finally got the resolution. But it was kind of funny when you hear people going, well, that happened, 30 years ago. You should just get over it. It's like, well, you're not the one who had your career ruined.
Yeah, I mean, that whole like people get over it. It's I agree. Did you have another question, Trista?
Wondering if you're doing any virtual fests with Don't Look Back.
You know what? I'm not. But if somebody, no, wait a minute. Well, I'm not doing it, but we're premiering at Fright Fest in the UK, which is friggin' exciting.
Yeah. I was at Fright Fest a few years ago.
And the thing is, ever since I was little, I saw like this Merchant Ivory movie, Maurice, and I saw Another Country with Rupert Everett, which was great. So ever since I was little, I was like, I'm going to go to England and marry a Brit. So I've always dreamed about going to London. And I was like, well, when I get a movie in Fright Fest, then I'll definitely go. And then my movie gets in this year and it's like friggin' COVID. So I can't go. So, but I'm really thrilled that we're playing there. Like, that's such an honor. So I thought you meant like, am I speaking? Because I'm so self-centered. I'm like, oh, I'm not but yeah, no, we're having our world premiere at Fright Fest, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Too bad you can't. Well, you can make it there, but too bad it's not actually, happening.
Yeah, I could virtually be there, but not. I'll go next year.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Actually, too, have you ever been to Scarefest in Kentucky?
I haven't been to Scarefest.
I think that's Scarefest. It's one of the old. I think it might be the oldest horror convention in Kentucky.
Well, I'm annoyed they haven't invited me because every time that I get invited, I'm one of those guys, like, I never turn a festival down just because, again, it's like any chance to meet the fans and be supportive. Yeah. Like I'm there. So, yeah.
I went there a few years ago because the guy who does our written reviews lives in Kentucky, and it was a fun show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, did that and the Bourbon Trail also before I quit drinking.
You do the Bourbon Trail and then I don't remember the next few days after that, but they were.
Yeah, it's a weird concept because like the last thing you do is the taste test for no one who ever has done this of the bourbon, and then they tell you basically you go drive to the next place, which I don't know. I don't want to give a bad name, but it doesn't seem like the best idea to drink a bunch of bourbon then go drive to another area. But
yeah, that's Kentucky. That's how we roll in the Bluegrass State.
But I had a good time though. It was very fun. All right, so October 16th, Don't Look Back in theaters. Is it gonna do like drive-ins?
Drive-ins. Yeah, we're still trying to see which ones are gonna get locked down. Gosh, awful wording. See which theaters we can lock down. So we're still seeing which drive-ins we can lock down, and then it'll definitely be on all the streaming platforms, and you can actually pre-order it now on iTunes. It's already up on iTunes to pre-order. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm really excited, and also I do have a movie that I produced along with some other great producers that Timothy Woodard Jr., who directed The Final Wish, directed, and it's called The Call, and Lynn Shaye is in it, and Tobin Bell. So they're
which I actually have my notes, but I forgot to mention it. But
no, but it's cool because that's the first pairing of them on screen, and they're amazing. And
awesome.
We have a great cast, and it opened Friday and did really, limited theatrical, but the per screen average was really high. So it'll be playing for I think a couple more weeks in theaters and drive-ins.
Nice.
So if you want to get if you want to get double Reddick for October, check out The Call and check out Don't Look Back.
Cool. I'm looking forward to. I've seen Don't Look Back and I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing The Call as well.
That was the most ridiculous phrase. I should practice like come on to talk to people.
I just noticed you had a Nightmare on Elm Street shirt on.
Oh yeah, it's
for a while.
But it's the remake shirt. So
which you just said bad things.
But I couldn't find an original one. But I'm like, it looks close enough to the first.
It does, one. Yeah. I didn't know until you mentioned it.
The hardcore fans are like, dude, that's from the remake. I'm like, I can't find an original.
Unfortunately. Well, anyone out there can hook up Jeffrey Reddick with an original Nightmare on Elm Street shirt.
Yes. And a glove and $1 million.
Yeah, you're not asking for much. Yeah.
British husband and a British husband. That's all I want.
Right.
And world peace. And world peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Lastly, world peace.
Lastly, yeah. After all that, then world peace.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
I got to tell you, I love Trista because you've just got this like sweet, wholesome look about you. But then when you ask questions, it's like she's like digging in there. Like I got to watch what I say because she's listening to everything I'm saying. And she's like coming at me. No, but I don't mean that in a good way.
Yeah, Trista's great. I agree.
Yeah, no, I love your questions. So
Thanks.
Very good. I did too. Excellent questions, by the way. Well, how can people follow Don't Look Back or yourself if you want them to?
Yeah, if you follow Twitter's the best way. My handle on Twitter and Instagram are Jeffrey A. Reddick. I joke, but it's the truth. Like I'm more active on Twitter because Instagram is very visual based, and so unless you're have your shirt off or you're like doing something crazy every day, people don't want to sit there and watch me typing at my computer. Maybe there's some strange people out there that like I can just live stream myself.
Yeah, I don't quite get I don't get it either. It's like you basically just post a picture. You can't really have a conversation, I don't think, on it.
Yeah. And I might Photoshop my face onto like somebody's body and put it up there, but I'm not going to the gym, so I'm not going to do any thirst trap or whatever they're called.
Yeah, I've just now become familiar with that term recently. I saw someone using it. I had no idea what it meant, so I had to look it up.
Yeah, I learned it when Martha Stewart put a picture up recently, and they were like, "It's a thirst trap picture." I'm like, "What's that mean?" I was like, "Well, cool." So, but yeah, maybe I'll just live stream myself typing. There might be some people out there that are like, "Oh, that's soothing."
ASMR.
That's what I'm thinking. And then my cat's like walking and meow in the background. I'm like, "Get away from the keyboard, cat, because you're not typing." And the movie handle is Don't Look Back Move, MOV. So we couldn't spell out the whole.
Oh, because of the number of letters. Yes.
Yeah. So you can definitely follow me in the movie there. And yeah, we'll be releasing some, I know we had an exclusive clip on Bloody Disgusting, and we'll have some more clips coming out before the film, but yeah, I'm just really excited to see what people excited and nervous to see what people think about it. But I'm really proud of it. We had a great cast and crew, and it's a fun film. And The Call is really, really good too. And The Call is like hardcore, like R-rated horror film,
Mm-hmm.
So that's got your blood and guts. And then if you want to think a little, and
I like that they're thinking
and not have as much Gru on you, then you should go watch Don't Look Back.
Uh-huh. you know, I'm looking forward to the call, and I enjoy Don't Look Back. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Well,
and you're
I'm
going to
glad
continue to direct?
yeah. I have a couple more projects that I definitely want to direct. So this was a good like first experience. You know, I learned so much on it, and I definitely, when I was finished, I was like, okay, I'll do that again. So I think that's the mark of, yeah. My director friends are like, you're either gonna say you'll do it again, or you're gonna be like, I hate that, I'm never doing that again. So I fall into the first category where I want to do it again. So
that's very good. All right.
So I'll keep you all posted if I do.
Yeah, definitely. Love to have you back sometime.
Okay. Well, you both have a great day. It was nice meeting you, like, virtually.
You as well.
I guess this is the new meeting, so we'll just say meeting you now, because this is
yeah.
It's so nice meeting you. It's been so much.
Yeah.
Lovely hanging out with
you. Hug.
you.
Okay. All right. Y'all take care. Okay.
You as well.
Stay safe.
I will. You stay safe as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, hi. My name is Todd Farmer, and I put Nicolas Cage in space, and welcome to my tool shed. I'm here to talk to you about voting. And I know you're going to vote because you're smart, and because you love our country, and you love our planet, and you love our children in the future, and you know that there is an idiot in charge. So I need you to vote, and I know you will vote. But if you could do what I'm going to do and reach out to a couple of others, because there are a lot of people who didn't vote in the last election. There are also a lot of people who voted for an idiot in the last election. And they know it. They've seen it. 4 years, the smart ones on that side know. So I've reached out to a bunch of people I went to college with. I went to a small Christian college, grew up in a small town in Kentucky. Slowly and privately, I'm reaching out to some of them to talk to them about it. And you know what? It's worked. A lot of people who voted for Trump are going to vote for Biden this time. And a bunch of people who didn't vote last time will vote this time. So do what you can, because we got this, and we have to, because he's already out there saying if he loses, it's because we cheated. And we're not going to cheat. We're going to vote. So thanks for listening, and we're going to win this thing.